Alright, hi everyone. This is week 2, day 2. I'm the paperback podcaster and welcome back again. Well, you may have noticed that the cover page of my PowerPoint now has these two phrases. One is often maligned and the other is always sharing, sounds a bit pessimistic, but well, just to make it a bit more uh, illustrative. Well, another lesson for the day, law and order. In fact, today I've been out late and I was out, chit-chatting with a friend, an acquaintance. In fact, I felt he was more like a mentor. We talked a lot, um, and as such, I had lesser time this week to prepare this week 2 day 2 video. Anyway, let's go about talking more about today's topic. I hope that this has been very informative, instructive, and perhaps, in a way, shape the way you see things. Let's begin. Ever felt so good about going out to the street and it's so safe that you don't have to worry about being robbed? Have you ever had that feeling? Assuming if you happen to be living in one of those very developed cities, I was ever in Tokyo and I felt so good about roaming the streets, I'm referring to the day, without having to worry about some loony madman charging over with a sword. It was very safe. At the same time, I also went to certain other less developed cities, you probably know some of the names, where going around carries real risk of being mugged, or even murdered. So that's very worrying. And this brings to a very important point where law and order are very important to human civilizations. Else trade and commerce cannot take place at all, you know, without people being killed, without people being hurt, or without people being stabbed, in the streets. And not forgetting, without law and order, people will probably have to walk around carrying guns and swords. That's ridiculous, right? So do we need law and order? Of course we need. Okay, coming to the following page. Is there anything wrong with law and order? Nothing, you know. But I was reading this from J. Paul Getty's book. If you know who he is, the richest man in America, self-made billionaire from oil and gas. Anyway, he said a number of things, and I was reading his book. He said this. He said that law and order are important to human civilizations. Yes, the same thing that I told you earlier on is important because, if not, then how do you go out safe and be able to do your work and not having to worry about being stabbed, However, you know what, if you have read this book titled How to Be Rich, law and order unfortunately created a certain problem. The problem is a society of people who are incentivized to stop working, to stop thinking, and complacency then therefore runs amok. That's frightening, because what happens if people stop thinking, and that if the masses have abdicated, the right to think, to free will, or that they are told to believe what they should believe, then you get a problem. A problem of a mass of people who are followers. Wow, followers. Imagine you just need 5% of the population to control 95% of the masses, and the 95% of the masses are just followers. They believe what they see. And they are not thinkers or innovators. And that's the problem, It's so easy to be part of the masses. I say this because you have to realize that, it's you. If you wish to succeed in life, you cannot think and be a follower. And the education system in many societies, I'm speaking for the country where I come from, the society I'm in is one where people are educated to follow. They are not trained to be thinkers, they are not given the opportunity to innovate, and where they are trying to think of something, or when perhaps a child in the school is trying to think of the norm, think of the box, he or she is ostracized for being a thinker, for being independent, from drifting away from the mainstream. That's what happens. And when if you happen to be such a person in the society where I'm in, or maybe in one of these similar societies, and you're a child like that, you have different thoughts, you have different views, what happens to you? Well, you get isolated, people see you differently, they think that you're weird, you're strange, and that's where, people influence people, one influence the other, and you have 95%, 99% of the population that behaves exactly the same. They become followers. Going on, I think being conditioned to think in a certain way is inevitable in most societies. In this certain country where I have visited, some time back, okay, I shall not mention the name, while people are literally conditioned to think in a certain way, and and not surprisingly, when you do talk to them, you find that hey, these guys are quite different, or rather they are quite consistent in their way of thinking, their mannerisms. Not exactly a bad thing, but that's what happens, when people, or generally the masses, if they're conditioned to behave in a certain way, they're educated to have a certain point of view, they all generally have a very consistent, personality, social beliefs and values. It's not a bad thing, but one has to realize that the ability to succeed means that you have to actually unlearn all of these rules that you learned in school, perhaps, right? And these rules are not meant to be harmful. These rules should not, de-incentivize you from wanting to succeed or do better than the rest. And following that, after unlearning all these rules, you have to relearn these. That's where you become different, right? And you from the past videos that you have watched, you have probably have realized that I'm a bit different. You know, you probably can't guess where I come from unless you check my IP address, right? You could, but I shall leave this as a separate topic for another day. Anyway, so yeah, and the not being able to realize that this conditioning can be an impediment to success is a common problem. Many people don't realize that this mental conditioning is actually harmful in certain ways. I ever visited a country where there was so much censorship. Yes, a lot of censorship. They censor quite a number of things, right? I shall not mention what those are. And the news are controlled. And that was literally quite, not just mentally, but intellectually suffocating, right? Because people are literally, fed on a silver platter what they are supposed to absorb. Well, in a way, I respected their government for what they did, for whatever reason they may have. But back to my point, realizing the importance of understanding how to avoid being conditioned to think is extremely important. And learning how to avoid being conditioned to behave in a certain way or to have certain perceptions or values is also very important, right? For instance, the trick question of whether a cup is half full or half empty, right? If you know that question, which is it? Is a cup half full or half empty? And you realize that if you ask the same question to certain people, certain groups of people from different countries, you find that you get very different answers, right? Because of the conditioning to think. And this conditioning comes right from the very day when people go to school, they receive their education, so they receive this mental conditioning. Anything wrong? Oh, there's nothing wrong. But like I said, the problem with this is that it becomes an impediment if it's not properly managed by the individual. I like to emphasize how important it is to clarify understanding, you know, and what you see today, what you come across today, how do you understand? How do you interpret? Like for example, a business decision, whether to make or buy, or a decision of whether to invest or otherwise, or perhaps a decision to believe or otherwise, or perhaps a contract to agree to something or otherwise. How do you read these? How do you know that what you are reading is correct? Well, I could also apply this to, do you even know the people that you're dealing with? Are they real? Do they mean what they say? And in fact, I like to add this question. Is what you know what it is? Is what you see what you really understand and what you really know? Is what you know the fact? Now, what seems real often may be unreal, right? Remember what Mark Twain said? He said that it's not what you don't know, right? That's never a problem. It's what you think you know and ain't true that gets you. That is the problem, right? And importantly is that, you know, whatever that we know as correct and factual, these are subject to questions, you know. Have you ever questioned what we believe are correct and factual? In the world of investing, you know, I'm a fan of investing in equities, bonds, options. In this field of investing, these brought up many things about the way I understand things, the way I interpret things, the way I carry my principles, the sort of things that I believe were true previously. It puts into perspective, you know, whether what I have learned was exactly true. And interestingly, you know, if you put yourself through this thought process, you know, you start to question yourself, what's real and what isn't, and what you have learned before, are these real? You may actually start to realize that many of these are not real, or very likely unreal, right? And that's the problem with you know, education systems in the world today, right? It it exists for a very good social good, that is to serve the interests of the population, right? To narrow the income gap, right? To narrow the social gap. But you know what? It has created certain problems. The way people behave, the way people think, right? These carry with carry along certain issues and problems. Well, that's my sharing today, and my point again today is that, you know, you have to realize that the rules that you have been following may not have been the right rules. They have been the wrong rules. Don't forget, the rules and regulations and whatever that you have learned in school are designed by someone else. And how do you know that someone else is exactly right? That someone else may, for all you know, be precisely wrong, isn't it? Okay, and I come to the end of my presentation. I hope that you have enjoyed my video, and I'm the Paperback Podcaster. Thank you for watching, and have a great week ahead. Thank you.